So you're stuck inside and isolated from the outside world, and you need something to pass the time. Have you thought about playing a game? There's crewmates and imposters, villages with cute anthropomorphic animals, zombies. But have you heard of this new game, Genshin Impact? Trust me, it's going to make a huge impact on the gaming scene. Forget about what you know about action RPG mobile gacha games. This is an action RPG open world fantasy adventure game with beautiful breathtaking visuals and music, engaging characters, an elemental magic battle system, and an addicting gacha game mechanic to get the waifu or husbando of your dreams. And it's for free. That is, unless you become a whale. So, are you in? Welcome to my channel. I'm Annie, the Dragon Maid, and this is the first of many deep dive videos. Now, a disclaimer. This video was made using various sources from the internet. The information I present to you may not be factual or accurate, therefore I encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. This video was made entirely for entertainment and research purposes. Please note that some of these sources were originally in Chinese. Since I don't understand nor speak Chinese, I translated them into English using Google Translate. Therefore, some statements and quotes will not be translated accurately. In addition, I am not knowledgeable in how to pronounce Chinese names or words. I looked up the pronunciations and practiced, but if I pronounce anything wrong, I apologize in advance. Feel free to teach me the correct pronunciation in the comments. Please be respectful as I tried my best to pronounce them correctly. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the video. You're not in 2020 anymore. You're in the land of Teyvat. You're the traveler. You might have been separated from your twin sibling upon arrival, but don't worry. You have Paimon to keep you company. We don't know where she came from, but you rescued her from drowning, remember? She will be your emergency food.
No, for the last time, Paimon is not emergency food.
Or guide. Soon you'll befriend several characters all belonging to the Seven Nations. Mondstat, Liyue, Sumeru, Inazuma, Fontaine, Natlan, and Snezhnaya, which are linked to the different elements. Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, Electro, Geo, and Dendro, and different gods called Archons. The Hydro Archon being the best, of course. They will help you search for your lost sibling, fight enemies, and explore the underlying mysteries of Teyvat. But you're probably really confused. Maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. This story begins at Shanghai Jiao Tong University in 2005. 3 university students, Sai Haoyu, Liu Wei, and Lu Hao, were classmates majoring in computer science. They met while working on a project together in 2009, which was an open source literature community called Free Writing, which earned them scholarships worth 200,000 yuan, Chinese currency, which is about $27,373.64 USD in the Chinese Academy of Sciences Technology Innovation Competition. They all shared a common interest and love for technology, anime, comics, and games, which they referred to as ACG, and decided to start a company to create their own game. But there was one problem. It was the mid-2000s, and there were very few studios in China that could develop the anime comic game that they had envisioned. Prior to 2008, the video game industry in China was small due to the ban on video game consoles. Put a pin in this because we will get back to it. During 2008, the country was experiencing an economic crisis. This economic crisis left them with limited career options as postgraduates, so they decided to create their own company. It's important to note that starting in June 2000 in China, there were concerns in regards to video game addiction and the negative influence of video games among the Chinese youth, leading to the ban on the importing, producing, and selling of video game consoles and arcade games, with the exception of PC games. This forced many Chinese players to switch to PC gaming, increasing the PC game market and the popularity of internet cafes. Since owning a PC and importing video games had proven to be expensive, they also turned to pirating games. In order to compete with this increase in piracy, Chinese video game companies started to incorporate free-to-play monetization services in their games. This made it easier for Chinese players to play games at affordable costs while the companies could continue to make profit. This concern about video game addiction came up again in 2007 when the Chinese video game market was rising in online gaming. An article by GamesIndustry.biz states, "The year 2007 exceeded expectations with the market growing more than 60%, driven by compelling and diverse content, free-to-play games, and rising demand for leisure and technology products," said Alison Leung, Pearl Research's managing director, end quote. This increase in mobile gaming was due to the growth of smartphones in addition to anti-addiction laws, which focus primarily on PC gaming, not including mobile gaming. This anti-addiction law, upheld by the Chinese government, required online gaming companies to incorporate anti-addiction software on their games by monitoring the playtime of its underage players. Now, back to MiHoYo. Starting a company is not easy and requires a lot of time, money, and investors. So the three of them would use that time to start building their resume and gaining experience. While simultaneously juggling their studies in game development, they would use their spare time to work on several projects together while developing a friendship with each other. Tsai Hao-yu had received an internship with a game company, and together with Liu Wei and La Lu Hao, he came up with the idea of making a game. Using the money they earned from the competition, in 2010, they developed a 2.5D isometric tile-based game engine called the Misato engine, or Misato 2D, using Adobe Flash Player. Rest in peace, Adobe Flash Player. The name Misato was inspired by the character Katsuragi Misato from the popular Japanese anime franchise Neon Genesis Evangelion. They then developed the game Legend of Saha using the same engine for the first Flash development competition in July of 2010, held during the second China Game Developers Conference, the CGDC, winning a cash prize of 30,000 yuan by Shanda Games, now going by the name Shengchu Games. Shengchu Games, seeing their potential, would then outsource them to develop the first expansion pack of Bubble Hall for the minigame Bubble Heroes. They were so impressed by their work that they had developed an interest in acquiring their team. However, they turned down their offer in favor of their desire to create their own company in games. In January 2011, the three second-year graduate students, living in a rented house, eating nothing but snacks, ramen, vegetable rice, and bone soup every day in the D32 dormitory of Shanghai Jiao Tong University Minheng campus, founded MiHoYo Studio. The company was initially planned to be named Hoyo, named after the two founders, Tsai Hao-yu, H, and La Lu Hao, Y, and the two O's inspired by the O's contained in famous company giants such as Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, but it was already registered, which prompted them to add Mi, which was inspired by Vocaloid virtual idol Hatsune Miku, who was popular among the otaku and ACG space. Along with the company name, they developed the slogan, "Tech Otakus Save the World." According to an article by Navic, otaku is a neutral term in China and refers to committed fans of tech and ACG. MiHoYo's tagline, "Tech Otaku Save the World," captures the founding team's interest in tech and ACG. And the second part, "Save the World," celebrates the achievements of geeks. With the three founders lacking artistic ability, they contacted Zheng Xinhua, also known as CC, whom they found through social media, who would go on to design all the artwork for their early games, commissioning him to create the character Kiana Caslana, who would end up being the main character of their game Fly Me to the Moon. Fly Me to the Moon is the first installment of the Honkai series and was MiHoYo's first game created before the establishment of the company, taking 6 months to develop. It was released on September 28, 2011 on the Apple App Store by MiHoYo Studios as an independent developer for originally 18 yuan and later for free. Ironically, that was the same month and date as Genshin's release, just 10 years later. The name Fly Me to the Moon and the game's concept was inspired by the ending theme song to the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. The team was inspired to create a puzzle game about a magical girl flying to the moon. The game was a single-player 2D platforming game with exploration, puzzles, racing, and survival. The story centered around the adventures of the main character Kiana Kaslana as she dreams of traveling to the moon. The game's description on the App Store reads, "Fly me to the moon. As the heiress of the Kaslana family, the 16-year-old witch Kiana has always dreamed of finding the eclipse and restoring honor to her family name. With 60 engaging levels, you will experience superb graphics, unique gameplay, and a captivating storyline that will make you fall in love with Kiana. Download now and fly to the moon with Kiana." The team developed the game using Coco's 2D software and Box 2D physics engine. Moon Trip, the game's theme song, was composed by Vocaloid music producer Yu Jian Liu, with Lemon Jolly writing the lyrics. Fly Me to the Moon was not successful financially and only made the team 4,000 yuan, equivalent to 548 USD monthly. Within 1 month, the game had been downloaded 3,000 times and was recommended by the Apple App Store in both Japan and the United States. Following this lack of financial success, Liu Wei started to look for investors representing the team in various startup competitions. In China, anime/gaming was not mainstream, and this lack of anime/gaming culture in China made it difficult for the team to find investors. An article by the paper China states, in 2011 and 2012, domestic animation startups were not considered profitable projects, and there were very few domestic developers in the animation game field. Although the team did catch the attention of some investors who were willing to invest in the team, but they asked them to change the project to make a Three Kingdoms style or martial arts games, which were proven to be marketable, but the team rejected these offers. The team also experienced some setbacks being turned down in some of the startup competitions, but by the end of the year, they eventually received an angel investment of 1 million yuan, equivalent to about 136,992 USD, from Hangzhou Sky Network Technology Co. In the same year of November 2011, 24-year-old Liu Wei participated in the New Entrepreneur Talents competition representing MiHoYo. There's a video that circulated on the internet of MiHoYo's early days, uploaded onto YouTube on September 12, 2021 by user Violet. The video is in Chinese, but was translated to English. The video shows Liu Wei attempting to gain the interest of investors. He goes up on stage and he takes the mic. He's wearing a simple white dress shirt with black pants. It seems like he's talking really fast, but the way he talks is very straightforward. He starts off by introducing himself.
评委老师，各位现场的创业前辈，你们好，我是来自上海交通大学MiHoYo创业团队的刘伟。我们团队的创业项目是虚拟偶像计划。我们的核心产品是萌系移动游戏。所谓萌系移动游戏，是指在手机和平板电脑上玩的以萌系动漫人物为主角，主角一般为甜美可爱的美少女设定的动漫游戏。这种类型的游戏一般深受宅男的喜爱，所以我们的最核心用户是宅男。我们自己也是宅男，所以我们深刻理解宅男的需求。
It's evident from the beginning that he and his team had a very clear goal, which was to create a game for otakus or gamer/anime lovers. They knew their target audience would be otakus, and they knew exactly what they wanted to see. And since they were otakus themselves, they could resonate with their feelings of loneliness and isolation. He mentions his team's desire to expand to not only create online games, but to create a unique virtual idol experience through music and interactive media.
因此，我们是以移动游戏作为切入点。但当我们的游戏积累了一定的粉丝，当我们的游戏有了一定的玩家之后，我们会将我们的虚拟偶像产品拓展到互动媒体、在线文学、在线游戏、数字音乐，直到实现我们的终极目标，拓展到周边市场。
He also mentions the struggles him and his team had while in the process of developing these mobile games.
以前在交大的时候是在校学，是没有什么钱，然后也没有什么其他的资助，但是我们就做这个东西做了1年啊。然后我们最辛苦的时候是每周工作7天，每天工作10几个小时，但是我们觉得我们也很开心，就因为享受这种被拯救的感觉啊。
Throughout his speech, he continually uses the word saved or mentions this concept of being saved. Going back to the beginning of the video, he mentions the experience and feelings of being an otaku.
宅男是一群很好、很善良、很有爱，却又很可怜的人。他们内心有着强烈的跟异性交流的需求，却因为巨大的心理压力不敢行动。因此，宅男一般都是属于这种内心很苦恼、很孤单、很寂寞的人。我们就是要解决宅男的这种需求，所以我们游戏的最大特点是，除了保证游戏的好玩性之外，我们更注重通过游戏塑造玩家喜欢的虚拟角色，打造一个虚拟偶像的概念。
Thus, these virtual characters in their games were created to appeal to otakus. As we mentioned earlier, they are their target audience, and this concept of being saved is to give otakus a sense of relief from their feelings of loneliness, isolation, or distress by creating this experience of feeling saved by their virtual idol. There's also humor in the way he speaks, making the audience laugh. However, some commenters thought that the audience was laughing or mocking him, but one comment reads, "They were laughing because of the atmosphere." He's very straightforward and kept on adding humor whenever he speaks. He actually crowd managed the judges so well. They were so fond of him. You can literally hear in the end laugh and cry noises in the background. This is so normal in high schools and universities for research-related settings. This video is important to note as it represents the humble beginnings of MiHoYo and their initial goals and plans they had in regards to the creation of their games. In a time where anime gacha mobile games were not as popular or well known as they are now, they tried to convince everyone that there was a growing potential in this market. With their efforts, MiHoYo ended up winning 3rd place in the competition. Their reward, a 100,000 yuan grant interest-free loan from the Young Eagle Plan of the Shanghai Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Center, as well as a 50 square meter office space given to them for free for half a year or a total of 6 months. A month later, in December 2011, they moved out of the dormitory into the office. Their initial team consisted of 5 people in one office, with each of them having a desk against the wall and a large table in the middle of the room where they stored their comics and light novels. The team consisted of the 3 founders as well as Cece and Jin Shucheng, although by March 2011, Jin Shucheng, who took part in the development for Fly Me to the Moon, had left to work at Cisco Systems China Research and Development Co. On January 13th, 2012, MiHoYo was officially established as a company. Cece, who had previously worked as an artist at 4399 Network Co., Ltd., officially joined MiHoYo a month later in February 2012 as art director and supervisor. After the creation of Fly Me to the Moon, despite its lack of financial success, they still had the angel investment by their side, and they were determined to create a successful game. Taking inspiration from the shooter game Zombie Town, the Persona series, and the anime High School of the Dead, they created Houkai Gakuen 1, known by its English name Zombie Gal Kawaii. The game took 1 year to develop, and was initially developed in December 2011, but officially began development in February of 2012, with animation and world setting development in March 2012, and content production in July 2012. It took the team 3 months to develop the demo, having 4 to 5 demo versions before the final product. If the demo was near completion and the team wasn't satisfied, they would discard it and do another iteration, causing several delays. Despite this, they felt that their time wasn't wasted, as they learned a lot from this experience. The game was first developed using Unity engine, but they didn't have a suitable development tool within Unity, so they instead switched to Autodesk Maya computer graphics software, allowing the art team more flexibility. The game entered internal testing in October 2012, and the first version of the game came out in November 2012. Followed by public testing on the 91 platform, then officially released on December 14, 2012 in China on the Apple App Store for 6 yuan, and June 20th, 2013 globally. Houkai Gakuen is an action game set in a school campus where the main protagonist, Kiana Caslana from Fly Me to the Moon, fights against zombies using various weapons. You also may notice by this point that in their games they had no male characters and only female characters, as they saw female characters as an important part of their games, stating their intention to not include male characters in the future. When the team first submitted the game for review, the Apple App Store's review team had refused to put the game on the App Store because they felt the game's content was inappropriate and promoted pornography and violence, with them mistakenly thinking that the enemies the protagonist was shooting were the chibi girls. However, after communicating back and forth with the Apple review team multiple times and making several revisions and modifications, Apple finally approved and the game was put on the App Store. Unfortunately, Houkai Gakuen didn't receive the success that the team had hoped for, as the game was not profitable as a standalone game and became relatively unknown among audiences, with the game only managing to receive less than 100,000 daily active users. Despite this, it had received a relatively good response from the gaming community and would ultimately lay the foundation for their future games. After this setback, the team experienced a lack of direction, with Liu Wei stating in an article for China News, "At that time, we couldn't see the direction of the industry clearly, and we didn't know how to go in the future." End quote. At this time, the founders had only received a monthly salary of 4,000 yuan, which was less than what their classmates earned after graduation, with each of them taking on multiple roles and any type of work they could. During these experiences, they had made efforts to gain a better understanding of the needs of their players. In the early days, when the team made games, they focused on pursuing their own hobbies and lacked an understanding of the gaming market by focusing on their own gaming preferences, instead of considering the player's needs. In an article by China News, learning from his time working a customer service role, Liu Wei realized that behind every user is not just a piece of data, but a living person, each of whom has his own needs and problems. Only by chatting with them can we truly feel the joys, sorrows, anger, and happiness of the players, and truly empathize with them. Instead of focusing solely on the money, the team wanted to make a game that would satisfy players, with MiHoYo stating, "Making money from games is an additional thing, not what we pursued at the beginning, and it is still the same now. I am very happy that Houkai Gakuen made a little money. Everyone continues to make this game. Whether this game is successful or not is not the main thing. We think that happiness is the main thing." End quote. At this time, the team had solely relied on investor money and were not making a lot of money. With almost no funding left, the company endured the later half of 2013. They used this time to improve Houkai Gakuen's gameplay, spending 3 months expanding the game's content, increasing the number of weapons from 28 to more than 200, increasing the number of costumes from a dozen to 70 or 80, and adding different characters, which would later become Houkai Gakuen 2. In 2013, Apple finally secured a deal with China Mobile to sell iPhones in the country, which contributed to the rise in mobile gaming in the Chinese market. Due to mobile devices being less expensive than computers or the hardware of consoles and their ability to connect to the internet, they became a popular choice for gaming among Chinese players. Houkai Gakuen 2, also known by its English name Guns Girl Z, is a 2D side-scrolling shooter game with the gameplay building off of Houkai Gakuen 1. It started development in June of 2013. 6 months after the release of Houkai Gakuen 1, with server architecture design and selection in August 2013, and system development and worldview settings in November 2013. The development time was shorter due to its use of Houkai Gakuen's data, art assets, and core gameplay. However, the biggest difference from Houkai Gakuen 1 was that Houkai Gakuen 2 was free upon download with in-game monetization. Due to the team's lack of knowledge of gaming systems, they developed the core gameplay by copying and converting the system of the game Puzzle & Dragons into an action game. The beta testing was then released on January 26, 2014 on the popular Chinese video sharing platform Bilibili, which at the time was relatively small, with the full game releasing on March 28, 2014 on the Apple App Store. Bilibili, which at the time had 70% anime users on the platform, played a role in helping Houkai Gakuen 2 gain exposure. In an interview for the Honkai Impact 3rd X Neon Genesis Evangelion collaboration, Liu Wei states, "I remember that day clearly, and I'll never ever forget it. It was January 26, 2014. We released the game on Bilibili, which was still a small platform. The game had its own page. The top on revenue of the launch day was 100,000 yuan. I was on cloud 9. I had never made so much money in my life. Players topped up 100,000 on our first day. Imagine! It was 200,000 on the second day and 400,000 on the third day because it was so close to Lunar New Year's Eve. Every day felt like a dream." End quote. Houkai Gakuen 2 became MiHoYo's most successful game at the time, receiving high recognition from both its players and the market, winning the 2014 Best Anime Style Online Game Golden Peng Award and the 2014 Most Popular Mobile Game Award. However, the game ran into some technical problems such as players' payments not being processed and the servers crashing, as well as many other challenges, making it difficult to manage. At the time, the team consisted of only 7 people, and it soon became overwhelming for them, leading them to hire their own players as customer service representatives. Liu Wei was not only the founder, but took on various hats such as a customer service representative in MiHoYo's early days during the promotion of Houkai Gakuen 1 and 2. He would then serve as the R&D or Research and Development Manager and customer service representative who would answer players' questions and interact within the community. This not only became MiHoYo's way of marketing their games, since they didn't do any formal marketing, but was a way for them to build long-term connections with their players. Players would then grant him the nickname Brother Dawei, who would become a character in Guns Girl Z and later Honkai Impact 3rd. In 2014, at the Game Look Game Open Day, when asked why they decided to make Houkai Gakuen, Sai Haoyu stated, "There are many reasons why we decided to make the game Houkai Gakuen. When we made this game, we didn't think about the game segmentation or too much. We just wanted to make a game that we like to play. So we made it. When we wanted to play games ourselves, we found that there was no game on the App Store best-selling list that we wanted to play. So we made a game that we wanted to play. The reason is that simple." End quote. The year of 2014 would also be the year of the Honkai universe being born, which is a shared lore among MiHoYo's games. At the Game Developer Conference in 2021, Sai Haoyu stated, "Our company has a goal in mind, which is to create the Honkai universe. Something like a meta-universe we mentioned recently, I guess. We first had this idea in 2014, long before we started Genshin Impact. It is not difficult to see our goal if you look at our history, to see the games we made from Guns Girl Z to Honkai Impact and Genshin Impact." End quote. In 2014, the ban on video game consoles was partially lifted, allowing video game consoles to be manufactured within the Shanghai Free Trade Zone and sold in China prior to inspection. By July of 2015, the ban was completely lifted, allowing companies like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and many others the ability to manufacture and sell video game consoles anywhere in the country, thus opening up a new market for video game consoles. Honkai Impact 3rd is the successor to Houkai Gakuen 2 and is based off of the ongoing manga by the same name. It is a free-to-play 3D action role-playing game which also features hack and slash and gacha mechanics. The game is set in an alternate version of Earth and a post-apocalyptic world plagued by catastrophes caused by the Honkai. The Honkai have the ability to corrupt humans, create monsters, and give certain humans godlike powers which allow them the ability to trigger apocalyptic events. These humans with godlike powers are known as Hershers. Players take on the role of powerful female warriors called Valkyries and fight against enemies using a variety of skills and weapons. The combat gameplay is influenced by the game series Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, with the development team also studying the game Guilty Gear Xrd, which uses 3D cell shading. Honkai Impact 3rd features notable characters from Houkai Gakuen 2, including Kiana Caslana, Raiden Mei, and Branya Zaychik. The game began development in June of 2014. On July 6, 2014, founder and former CEO of MiHoYo, Hao-Yu, attended the 6-Game Look Open Day event in Shanghai and gave a keynote speech stating that the game was in the development process and would be released in 2016. The game took 2 years and 4 months to develop. In March of 2015, MiHoYo developed character design as well as a 3D game engine from scratch using various online resources to study 3D modeling and cartoon rendering. They did this by creating a physics-based animation system that could stimulate different materials using physical calculations. This created more realistic character movements and destructive scene effects. This animation system could also correct abrupt transitions between animations, which made the animations more natural and smooth. MiHoYo would then develop its own technologies for 3D modeling, light mapping, and real-time pre-rendering systems. At the time, 3D mobile games were not common as most mobile games had 2D art styles and characters. Making the transition from 2D to 3D had proven to be a challenge for the 7 developers as none of them knew how to do 3D projects. Thus, the creation of the artwork, model, and animation of the main character, Kiana Caslana, would take 6 months to complete. After completing a test run, the team, not feeling satisfied with their current work, decided to discard it and restart from scratch, creating the current system. October 2015 was content production, with the internal beta released in October 2016, a small-scale closed beta testing in September 2016, then the game was officially released on October 14, 2016 on all platforms in China to generally positive reviews. A research report in 2022 by Huaxin Security states, the game boasts enhanced operability and replayability, delivering a stronger visual impact and a more satisfying combat experience through 3D battle scenes combined with a third-person follow-through perspective." End quote. They continue to praise the game for its high quality and its ability to stand out from the then and current anime-style mobile market, as well as its ability to maintain its position among the top domestic anime-style mobile games. The game was overall praised by players for its character design, graphics, storyline/plot, action scenes, and combat experience. Although some players were dissatisfied by the excessive grinding and poor payment experience. Despite this, the game has continued to be beloved by many players till this day. The day after its release, the game was recommended and received a featured banner on the Apple App Store homepage and was in the top 10 of the action game category for 20 consecutive days, as well as recommended by the Mobile Hardcore Alliance, a team composed of major smartphone manufacturers in China, winning several awards including top 10 popular games from the Mobile Hardcore Alliance, top 10 online games of 2016 from Huawei Games, and Best Anime Style Online Game Golden Peng Award of 2016. By June 2017, the number of Honkai Impact 3rd game accounts exceeded over 22 million registered accounts, with its revenue exceeding 1.1 billion yuan. Before becoming popular with global audiences, it gained popularity within Asia. In Japan, it was released on February 22, 2017, gaining 1 million downloads 11 days after its release. In North America and Europe, it was released on March 28, 2018 on iOS and Android, having 350,000 pre-registered users in the US and Europe before its launch, eventually surpassing 35 million total downloads worldwide. In an interview with Pocket Games in 2018, Liu Wei stated, "Our goal for Honkai Impact 3rd was to create the best anime-inspired ARPG mobile game on the market." End quote. In April 2017, Sakura Samsara was released in the Honkai Impact 3rd 1.4 update. According to its wiki page, Sakura Samsara is a special area where captains can fight Honkai beasts and accomplish missions in an open-world setting. Similar to a typical adventure game, there is no loading after entering, as the entire map is seamless. Enemies and collection nodes will spawn randomly, and main storyline quests, as well as side adventure tasks, can be accomplished. This release of Sakura Samsara, which included the backstory of the character Yae Sakura, brought the team a lot of inspiration for what would be their next project, as it was their first attempt at creating an open-world experience. Although this attempt was far from what the team had envisioned their ideal open world to be, it made them even more determined to create an open world experience 3 years later, which would eventually become, you guessed it, Genshin Impact. By 2018, over 200 people worked on the game, with over 100 working in research and development. After the launch of Honkai Impact 3rd in 2016, the MiHoYo team noticed that the game's daily active players started to split in half. Back then, in the gaming industry, it was common to see a game start to gradually decrease in popularity after its peak. Starting to fear for the game's popularity, the team thought about how they could further intrigue players and create the best game they possibly could. Their ultimate dream game, if you will. Seeing the potential power of storytelling, they came up with the idea of incorporating a storyline, or what would be called the Honkai universe, that they created back in 2014. At the time, action games and storyline games were thought to be incompatible. Because of this, some of the team members were skeptical, thinking it was not practical as they would have to put in a whole month of work with every version release. They also wondered if this would be the key to boosting interest in the game. They thought in order to make Honkai Impact 3rd a successful game in the industry, they needed every part of it to be the best, and that included a good storyline. 2018 would be a busy year for the team, as they only had 1 year to develop the storyline and complete Chapter 8 of Will of Hersher to prove that a storyline would be a valuable addition to the game. This would be a huge challenge for the team, but also an opportunity for them to take risks. They would then have discussions within the different departments, and they would ultimately lend their support to the team. The team would then create stages within the game, with each stage progressing the story with elements of exploration and Easter eggs. Version 2.5 of Will of Hersher would introduce the first Hersher character, who would end up having her own in-game content. And for the players who were not into the storyline, they would create animated shorts. The team's hard work would ultimately pay off, as Will of the Hersher would end up being an unexpected turning point for the team, as it was highly praised and well received by players. Another huge milestone for the game was when the animated short Final Lesson was released, in which the team started to see a small increase in their revenue, proving that a storyline brought an essential value to the game. Does any of this sound familiar? As you may have noticed by now, all of these elements that shaped Honkai Impact 3rd would later be incorporated into Genshin Impact. Over the next several years, the Chinese video game market would continue to grow rapidly. According to a 2018 staff research report by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, from 2013 to 2017, the value of China's digital market more than doubled, from 13.8 billion to 32.5 billion USD in just 5 years. After the overwhelming success of Honkai Impact 3rd, MiHoYo would then go on to produce other games such as Tears of Themis and global phenomenon Genshin Impact in 2020, Honkai Star Rail in 2023, and most recently Zenless Zone Zero in 2024. Now you're probably wondering why I'm going through MiHoYo's whole history in a video about Genshin Impact. Well, it's important to highlight the goals, struggles, and achievements of MiHoYo in order to fully understand the team's process of developing Genshin Impact. Before we discuss the development of Genshin, let's first talk about what the game is about. The player is introduced to two interstellar traveler twins who are traveling across different worlds in the universe. Upon arriving in Teyvat, they witness the destruction of one of the nations, Khaenri'ah, while attempting to flee. However, a mysterious unknown god who calls herself the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles attacks and separates them, sealing whichever twin the player chooses for 5 centuries. Upon awakening, they as the traveler rescue the character Paimon from drowning, who becomes their guide and loyal companion as they begin the search for their lost sibling. Basically, you play as the protagonist in a plot of your favorite isekai anime. Now, you might be asking, how does the game work? Genshin Impact allows the player to add 4 interchangeable characters to their party setup. Playable characters have control over one of the 7 natural elements: Anemo, air; Geo, earth; Pyro, fire; Hydro, water; Cryo, ice; Electro, electricity; and Dendro, plants. Players can quickly switch between characters while in combat, which allows them to use a combination of different skills and attacks to perform elemental reactions. These elemental reactions can be combined, which give the player a variation in different combat styles and increases damage to enemies. Examples of this are the elemental reaction superconduct, which occurs when either cryo or electro come into contact with each other, or the elemental reaction electrocharged occurs when hydro and electro come into contact. These elements can also interact with the game's environment. For example, instead of using a hydro character with your cryo character to freeze the enemy, if you have a cryo character and it's raining, you can instead use the rain to freeze the enemies, which the player can shatter using an attack, which creates physical damage to the enemy. Another example would be if the player uses an electro character and it's raining, a wet status will be applied to the enemies and everything in the area, which causes an electro-charged reaction. In addition, certain elemental abilities are required by the player to solve puzzles within the game. Each playable character has an elemental skill and an elemental burst. Elemental skills are attacks with a set cooldown and can be used at any time as they don't require energy to use, while elemental bursts are ultimate attacks that have an energy cost requiring the player to increase enough elemental energy in order to use them. Players can enhance the level of their characters to improve artifacts and weapons that they then can equip onto specific characters. The player can explore, open numerous chests as well as hidden chests, and fight enemies. Players can unlock various hidden achievements by completing tasks or actions. They can also fight bosses and complete challenges throughout Teyvat for various rewards and valuable resources by using a currency called original resin, which gradually regenerates over time. By completing these challenges, players can make progress in increasing their adventure rank, gaining EXP, which then can unlock new quests, challenges, and increase their world level. The world level represents how strong enemies are within the world, and the rarity rewards you can obtain by defeating them. When players increase their world level, the enemies become stronger and the amount of drop rewards increase. The player can control their character by running, climbing, swimming, walking, and gliding, but they are limited by stamina. Throughout Teyvat, there are many teleportation points that players can use as a fast travel to the different regions, along with statues of the 7 landmarks that can revive and heal characters as well as increase their stamina. Food can heal or revive characters' HP and can be found by hunting animals, finding fruit or vegetables, or purchasing food from in-game shops using Mora, or can be found while exploring, while enemies in treasure chests can drop resources that can be useful in increasing the strength of characters. In addition, there are special areas called domains where players complete challenges while earning various rewards such as artifacts, materials, Mora, and EXP. The game offers certain quests such as Archon quests, which are the main story quests, primarily following the adventures of the traveler as they search for their lost sibling, story quests which center around playable character stories and their interactions with the player, and world quests which are side quests that are scattered across the map and given to the player through NPCs for various rewards. In addition to this are event quests, which are limited time events where players can receive special rewards. Players can unlock playable characters in the beginning of the game as they progress throughout the game. However, characters are primarily obtained by pulling on character banners in a gacha system called wishes. What are these banners, you might ask? Well, in Genshin, there are 3 character banners. Standard banner, which is a permanent banner that requires a quaint fate in order to pull. A limited banner and weapons banner, which are both available for a limited time. They are the 2 wish banners that most players roll on since it has limited characters and weapons, which both require intertwined fates in order to pull. The game's in-game currencies can be obtained by purchasing using real-life currency or through gameplay rewards. The player then uses these currencies to pull on their desired character. This is determined by a pity system which guarantees a rare 4 or 5-star character or a weapon after a certain number of pulls. Players can play single player or multiplayer, referred to as co-op, once they hit adventure rank 16. Up to 4 players can play together while exploring the world and completing domains. Players can be matched by requesting to connect with other players or can be matched by an automatic search. Genshin has a teapot function where players can create and decorate their own home as well as invite other players to their home. The game features cross-platform play, which allows players to play together on any platform. The game also has an additional permanent game mode, which is a tabletop-based collectible card game called Genius Invocation TCG, similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, released in the version 3.3 update. This gameplay allows players to build decks, collect cards, and battle NPCs or other players in co-op mode. On October 22, 2025, a sandbox module and user-generated game creation UGCC gameplay system called Miliastra Wonderland was released in the Luna 2 version 6.1 update. This game system, separate from the main game, lets players create and share their work using a variety of assets, terrain, perimeters, and enemies within Genshin Impact to build their own minigame. They can also play other games made by players within the community, similar to Roblox. Players are given 2 playable characters, a male named Mannequin and a female named Mannequina, which they can customize. These characters can be played within Miliastra Wonderland, but can also be played within the world of Genshin Impact with some restrictions. MiHoYo, the producer and one of the founders of MiHoYo, considered creating a new project at MiHoYo, which would, quote, enhance MiHoYo's core research and development capabilities and present products with a significant quality improvement to its players in the future, end quote. In late January of 2017, Genshin Impact started its development, the working title being Honkai 4th in English. Liu Wei and the team at the time were playing GTA or Grand Theft Auto, The Witcher 3, and Elder Scrolls on console, which had given them an exploration experience that exceeded their expectations. And so they asked themselves, what would it feel like if we could experience these open world games on mobile phones? The year was 2017, and at that time, nobody had yet created a prominent and successfully mainstream open-world mobile game. The iPhone 7, despite being the best-selling phone that year, didn't even have the capabilities to run an open-world game. Thus, when developing Genshin, MiHoYo made a decision to design the game for mobile phones that would release 3 years in advance. Although this proved to be a gamble, as the certainty that the game's performance would combat the capabilities of future mobile phones was unknown. Liu Wei had played many open-world games, but when he played Nintendo's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on his Nintendo Switch, that was when he experienced open-world games in a different light. Thus, the team mainly took inspiration from Nintendo's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's world exploration, with other inspirations coming from Bethesda Game Studios' mission story systems, random events in Grand Theft Auto, the elemental magic battle system of Magicka, and the strategy in Divinity Original Sin, as well as from studying Naughty Dog's talks at game developers conferences. In an interview for an online Genshin showcase in Korea, Liu Wei states, when Honkai Impact 3rd went online and achieved a measure of results in September 2016, we began to think, and continued to think for around half a year, about what our next product was going to look like. For most of the first half of 2017, we were very anxious. What sort of product would we find exciting and out of imagination? So we returned to the beginning, to the question of what sort of game would we want to play. During that period, the thing we were playing most was open world games, and these games all featured huge worlds and exploration experiences that surpassed our expectations. So, since we want to play these games and are willing to make this sort of game, why don't we just do it? It was with this simple feeling that we began working on this project in 2017, but we realized later on that we had greatly underestimated the difficulty of creating an open world, end quote. And he was right about that. They had greatly underestimated the difficulty of creating an open world game. Designing an open world game was the MiHoYo team's biggest hurdle yet, as they were a small young team who didn't have prior knowledge nor experience. Not to mention, it was very different from what the team had created in the past. In the May 2021 PASH interview, the developers discussed the highs and lows of the game's development process. They described the development of the game as a both joyful and painful process for the team. Although the team experienced a lot of joy creating the world of Genshin and its characters, while also having the chance to work alongside other game enthusiasts, it also came with what they describe as pain. In the game's pre-release, there were issues of how the team could make the open world gameplay interesting. They also had to repeatedly improve and re-examine the mechanisms of the elemental reactions. Despite this, the team had a, quote, happiness-kept mindset, which meant that the more painful the development process was, the greater the joy the end result would bring to themselves and the players. Thus, the greater the players' enjoyment of the game, the greater the difficulties and issues the developers must have overcome. In their own words, they describe their pain as being closely tied to their feelings of joy. At the Genshin Fest 2023, Liu Wei reflects back on the time of Genshin's production. In other words, if he knew how difficult the production of Genshin would be, the team probably wouldn't have continued making the game. In an article, Liu Wei further discusses how difficult the development process was for the team, stating, "In the past, when we made games, the designers, artists, and programmers would create the designs, and then the QA team, quality assurance team, would test them. Once they were good, it was considered okay. But it's not like that at all now. Because in the entire open world, for example, if the person working on the terrain system makes even the slightest optimization or change, they'll find that everything on it is messed up. So there are always a lot of people saying, 'Why is my thing broken again?' or 'Who messed up my thing?' The team is arguing all day long, and the QA team is driven crazy every day." End quote. In addition, Liu Wei discusses the intricate process and difficulties when designing a vast open-world exploration game like Genshin. In Genshin Impact, we have provided a land area of approximately 20 to 30 square kilometers. On this land, various elements are distributed, including resource collection points, quests, and interactive points for players. These elements are organically combined. You cannot forcefully piece them together. Otherwise, it would be like the criticized approach of giving players 1,000 task lists and spreading them evenly on the map. This does not truly create an open world, nor is it what players desire. So throughout this process, we have explored many aspects. And even today, we are still exploring how to organically integrate these elements together." End quote. He compares the Genshin team's development process to building a Tower of Babel. The team only continued to increase after 2017, and thus they had to learn how to work together to produce an integrated game. Because of difficulties with the team's coordination during the development process, they had to postpone the first closed beta test to June 21st in order for them to present the best quality gameplay and content for players. Earlier, I mentioned games such as Grand Theft Auto, Witcher 3, and The Elder Scrolls. What do these three games have in common? Well, they all come from established studios that had the necessary resources, knowledge, and experience of creating open-world games. These developers and development teams of these games have worked and been in the industry for many years, even decades, as opposed to MiHoYo's small team of developers. From the game's preliminary stages between January 2017 and June 2017, there were many prototypes developed, although they soon realized that they didn't have the ability to create an open-world game without a foundation. The game was created using Unity 3D, in which the team purchased the full source code of their engine and then modified it in order to create an engine that could support open world development. Genshin Impact was also the first game by MiHoYo to be developed for PC, consoles, and mobile platforms simultaneously. One of the main challenges the MiHoYo development team had was the huge workload and resource management, along with their lack of experience developing for console platforms. There was definitely a huge learning curve in the development process, and the development team had big shoes to fill. However, despite encountering these various challenges, the team was full of passion and were motivated by their desire to create an open-world game with a multi-platform release. The game took 3 years to develop, with the production team originally having 150 people, growing to over 400 people by the time of the game's launch, and eventually reaching 500 people by 2020. With the research, marketing, and development costing 25 million USD and later exceeding to 100 million, with the company eventually regaining this amount 2 weeks after the game's release due to its overwhelming popularity. Most of the game's budget was invested in the music production, which is evident seeing how beautiful the music is in this game, with Yu Peng-chen joining the project as a music producer, composing the music for the Mondstat and Liyue regions. In the third Developer's Insight post, Genshin's music director, Zhou Sai, and Yu Peng-chen discussed the behind the scenes of creating the music for the game, stating, "We wanted to immerse players in Teyvat and really feel the diversity of the world. Building off the main thread of orchestral music, we added elements of different music from around the world to depict the colorful variety of Teyvat's regions and people." They further state, "When creating theme music unique to each city in Teyvat, we chose instruments and musical elements that most fit the distinctive styles of the locations." The HoYoMix team, aka the music team, had a desire to create authentic music that embodied as well as represented the culture and diversity of each region. They further accomplished this by recording and collaborating with top musicians and orchestras around the world. For instance, when creating the music for the Mondstat region, they traveled to England to explore folk music and culture with the London Philharmonic Orchestra recording the OST. Now, for a little fun fact, the London Philharmonic Orchestra has also done music for the games Final Fantasy XV and Dragon Quest. CC, who we mentioned earlier was responsible for the art in MiHoYo's early games, would take on the role of senior art director. The artistic vision of the game combines an anime-influenced cartoonish style with fantasy elements of real-world cultures, with each nation in the game being based on a real-world country. When discussing Genshin's regions, Liu Wei states, "In our game Genshin Impact, we have many regions representing different countries and cultures. In the region of Liyue, for example, we have works that showcase the charm of Chinese traditional culture. But in our own words, we call it a modern expression of traditional culture." End quote. In the collaboration documentary for the city Zhangjiajie, Genshin Scenery Art Team leader Heidi states, "We have always viewed Teyvat as a real world we were designing. With 7 distinct nations, the natural features of each region and the cultures and customs they represent are things we wanted to convey." End quote. It has not been officially confirmed by the creators specifically what countries Mondstat is inspired by, but it has been stated by the creators to be a European-style nation. According to players, Mondstat is theorized to take influences from medieval Europe, specifically Germany, with the name Mondstadt meaning Moon City in German. The southernmost region, Dragonspine, in Mondstat was released in the version 1.2 update and is known for its winter theme and cold climate. The team referenced photographs of real places being inspired by Matterhorn in the Alps with its lone tall mountain and a pointed pyramidal peak. As opposed to the other regions where the sun is shining brightly with good lighting and high color saturation, in Dragonspine the color saturation drops and the light source is cooler with low visibility. In order to make the snow look realistic, they researched many different resources, eventually deciding to base the snow on clouds, adding a color gradient similar to the look of clouds, thus creating a watercolor effect. Now, Dragonspine is a relatively small area of the map, and so the team tried to create more interior space in order to give players more to explore while connecting many areas inside the mountains so players can enter and move out of the areas with ease. They also created theme zones with a variation between each zone to create the experience of exploring an ever-changing landscape for players. The team wanted to create the feeling of coldness that you would experience on a snowy mountain, and so they created a sheer cold meter that appears once the player steps onto Dragonspine, which causes the players to lose health unless they find heat sources, thus creating this constant cycle of both tension and ease as they explore the region. Liyue is a reimagining of Chinese motifs within a fantasy world. The development of Liyue took 1 year, with MiHoYo mainly taking inspiration from the real-life Zhangjiajie National Forest Park in the Hunan province of China. What drew the team most to Zhangjiajie was the fantastical nature of its landscape and its otherworldly atmosphere. A signature feature of the territory of the Geo-Archon is sandstone. The view of the towering sandstone karst forests leave room for imagination due to being covered by swirling clouds. The team used the freehand style, which resembled traditional Chinese shen shui landscape paintings. They also went through a round of concept art and atmosphere sketch creation to make sure the region captured the right feeling. Zhangjiajie's atmosphere of 1,000 towering mountains and swirling clouds fit the team's artistic vision when designing Jue Yuan Karst, the area home to Liyue's Adepti, a group of immortal illuminating beasts. They also included elements such as trestle and suspension bridges to embellish the spaces between Liyue's mountains. The pathway to Liyue Harbor leads to the entrance of Mount Tianhyung, which takes inspiration from Tianmen Mountain. The scenic area of Huanglong, with its high altitude and ecological diversity, also served as inspiration for Liyue, along with its travertine waterfalls and multicolored pools serving as inspiration for Luhua Pool. The team utilized Huanglong as one of the blueprints for the overall planning of Liyue's ecosystem. Liyue's climate has characteristics similar to the southwest of China for its 4 distinct seasons, including its warm springs and cool autumns. The design of Liyue is influenced by the geo element with its warm-colored scenery. For Liyue's vegetation, the team used poplars as a creative reference. In Liyue's higher elevations, there are pagoda trees and bamboo, plum trees, and ginkgo trees growing on the plains and riverbanks. There are also wild creatures found among the rocky cliffs such as cranes and lizards, as well as various crabs and fishes in rivers. This blend of a more realistic design species and the more imaginative flora and fauna forms Liyue's unique ecosystem. Many people in China consider the city of Guilin to have the best scenery in the world, as it's known for its beautiful sprawling mountains, winding rivers, fishing boats, brick houses, smoking chimneys, and fishermen's songs. The team drew inspiration from Guilin's unique scenery and culture when designing the area Dihua Marsh in Liyue. They accomplished this by reconstructing the features of Guilin's landscape, including its water, mountains, flat-bottom boats, and fishing huts, while creating small details that depicted the lives of the people there. The building Wangshu Inn features elements of Guilin's architecture, giving players the feeling that there is more going on than they think, thus capturing the feeling of the inn in the film Dragon Inn. The region of Inazuma takes influences from Japan, with the name Inazuma meaning lightning. The team took real-life inspiration from the Biubugara cliffs known as the Dover of the Orient, resembling the White Cliffs in England. The players' exploration experiences while discovering secret places took inspiration from Studio Ghibli films such as Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro. Inazuma has purple-colored areas that are affected by the electro element and normal areas. For the normal areas of Inazuma that were not affected by the electro element, the team paid homage to the classic vegetation colors of Studio Ghibli films. Players have theorized that Inazuma's influence comes from Japan, specifically the Sengoku period and the Edo period. In another interview with Pash Magazine in the October 2021 issue, the developers discussed the process of developing the map of Inazuma. In the initial stage, the team wanted to incorporate the electro element into the exploration by combining the local biodiversity and geography in order to enhance the immersiveness of the map, creating each island with a clear theme and personality within its settings, plot, and game mechanics. They also came up with mechanisms to aid players in exploration. The region of Inazuma is an archipelago or a collection of islands with a limited land area, thus the complexity of the gameplay within its restricted area needed to be increased compared to other regions. Because of this, Inazuma contained more playable content for players, which significantly increased the load on players with mobile devices as opposed to PC and console players. In order to prevent crashes or freezing for players, the team ended up spending a lot of time on iterations to improve the gameplay of Inazuma as well as the in-game scenery. The team then created a system to improve performance for high-risk regions to ensure a smooth performance for players. The team felt the puzzles in Mondstat and Liyue were boring and repetitive as players were just lighting up torches. For Inazuma, they thought about how they could integrate the fun of solving puzzles in the worldview of the game by incorporating puzzles into the stories while linking them to the use of the electro element, as well as creating puzzles that were independent of the stories and quests. Despite them lowering the difficulties of the puzzles several times, they still proved to be challenging for players. The developers thought that making the puzzles more challenging would be beneficial as it would encourage players to communicate and collaborate with each other, as well as encouraging conversation and discussion among players. This proved to be effective as they noticed many players making friends upon completing the puzzles. According to a behind-the-scenes video on the music of Sumeru, after the theme of drizzling rain and flying sand was confirmed, Yu Pengchen thought about how the region of Sumeru has two different locations: the scenery of the rainforest, which reminded him of Southeast Asia, and the scenery of the vast deserts, including the location in the game Mausoleum of King Deshret, which reminded him of the Middle East. In addition, players have theorized that Sumeru takes influences from the Middle East and Southeast Asia, specifically a mix of ancient India, ancient Egypt, and ancient Persia. In a written interview by Yahoo Gaming SEA, MiHoYo, referred to as hoyoverse, was asked this: "Much like the first three nations we encountered, Sumeru seems to draw inspiration from real-world civilizations and cultures. But unlike Mondstat, Liyue, or Inazuma, Sumeru looks like it was inspired by multiple civilizations and cultures instead of just one. Why did you choose to take inspiration from multiple places for Sumeru, and why did you choose the ones you did?" They answered, "We wanted to create a completely fictional fantasy world through Genshin Impact, not a realistic one. However, we need references for such a creation. Hence, there are hints of or similarity to the real world. All real-world references and inspirations are deconstructed and recreated instead of simply being adjusted and adapted. By doing so, our ultimate goal is to present content that is in line with the unique worldview of Genshin Impact." End quote. The word Fontaine means fountain in French. When designing the natural environment for Fontaine, the team drew inspiration from certain European regions, specifically certain French regions, for example, the Alps. For the vegetation, they took inspiration from local plants, but had some difficulties when designing as they had already done similar designs for the region Mondstat. With the desire to make something uniquely Fontaine to differentiate it from Mondstat, they found inspiration from art history, which included European oil paintings from the 18th century, admiring its abstract, romantic beauty and stylistic features. For the main city, they used Baroque style, a Western style of architecture, music, dance, painting, sculpture, poetry, and other arts from the early 17th century, combining it with artistic elements such as water, gears, and clockwork, along with an Art Deco style. In the behind-the-scenes video for the music of Fontaine, a music producer for Genshin, D. Meng Yuen, states that Fontaine takes inspiration and incorporates elements from France, Great Britain, Italy, and other countries. Players have theorized that Fontaine's influences come from France and England during the Industrial Revolution, as well as Italy. The region of Natlan's influences have not been officially confirmed by MiHoYo. However, in Robert Ziegler's behind-the-scenes video, he states that Natlan's music takes influences from Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, and the Caribbean. Players have theorized that Natlan is inspired by a mix of Latin America, Mesoamerica, specifically the Aztecs, Oceania, Hawaii, and West African cultures. The region Snezhnaya has officially been confirmed by the creators, but is not yet officially released as of the recording of this video. According to the behind-the-scenes video for Snezhnaya, Snezhnaya is the nation of Cryo, the stronghold of the Fatui, and is home to the headquarters of the Adventurers Guild. It is described by the devs as a land that is defined by its harsh and frigid climate and takes inspiration from Eastern Europe and regions near the Arctic Circle. In these regions, people have carved out their homes from the ice and snow, making the land shaped and carved out through flame and steel. They drew upon the unique cultural traits of these real-world regions to bring their vision to life, building on this foundation and real-world cultural elements while including their own fantasy interpretations specific to Teyvat. They describe the region as a snowland, comparing it to the film Snowpiercer or the game series Metro. They state that these works capture an industrial aesthetic and cultural identity that is unique to frozen and permafrost regions. The team thought about including train carriages and how they could be a form of cultural expression. For example, these train carriages could be used as a camp or a makeshift theater, instead of limited to just being a vehicle. They further state how this connection between cultural elements and functional purpose creates an interesting design. Throughout the design process, they ask themselves, what operating rules should these trains follow? And what kind of gameplay can we fit inside these carriages? In other words, can they be more than just a means of transportation? During the development process, the team ran into some challenges. In the past, they had created the Autobus for Fontaine, but trains were much more difficult to design because of the multiple connected carriages. As a result, the geometric setup and motion simulation became more challenging. For co-op mode, this became even more difficult because of state synchronization and character interactions needing a more careful design. In order to make the trains feel more realistic, they needed to be scheduled across different tracks. In addition, how these trains interact with the environment and the transitions between the inside and outside of the carriages required a lot of careful planning and deep exploration. The music for Snezhnaya takes influences from folk music across Slavic cultures. Snezhnaya is theorized by players to take influence from Russia and Slavic countries. There are other regions within Teyvat that are considered separate from the Seven Nations. These regions are Nod-Krai and Khaenri'ah. They describe developing Genshin's story as weaving a huge canvas with many different threads. Over time, this canvas would gradually begin to take shape, which led to them discovering loose ends or unfinished ideas within the narrative. They saw this as an opportunity to further develop the stories about Teyvat's people, creatures, and incidents connecting them to the world as a whole. Looking back, they admit to having rushed the story, leading to a lot of important information being unexplored in the game's narrative. They also wanted to bring all of the groups together from the other regions in order to create a story for a common goal. However, in order to achieve this, they needed a location, and this location had to be, quote, a place where all elements naturally converge, similar to Gotham City in the DC Comics or the self-governing Crossbell State in the Falcom Trail series. Other examples being Night City in Cyberpunk, Zaun in League of Legends, Hive Cities in Warhammer, Tristram in Diablo, or Drangelic in Dark Souls 2. This led to the creation of Nod-Krai, which was created in order to tie up any loose ends in the story and unresolved foreshadowing before the game's final major arcs. The devs also drew from the game's earlier foreshadowing of the moon, using the moon as a central motif of Nod-Krai to emphasize its connection to the three moons that once existed above Teyvat, which play an important role in the game's lore. Going back to the canvas metaphor, they mention how using a canvas to tell the story means that all of the information is connected. Therefore, the devs can use familiar content to create new content while using ideas that are closely related to better prepare players for what comes next. Nod-Krai is described by the devs as an autonomous area. An autonomous region is an independent self-governed region. It is located on the edge of Teyvat in the southernmost part of Snezhnaya. Unlike the previous regions, Nod-Krai's cultural setting doesn't have a clear real-world archetype or counterpart. However, some of its scenery resembles the area around the Baltic Sea region. For the landscapes, the developers took inspiration from fjord scenery that's reminiscent of Nordic countries countries like Iceland and Norway. This concept of Nod-Krai became challenging for the devs because instead of using civilization as the main theme, they shifted the focus on people. Compared to the other regions, rather than focusing on a single nation, the story is instead driven by the people and their interactions with each other. They considered the people as actors on a stage, imagining what kind of civilization they will create, as well as what elements will be used. Players have theorized that Nod-Krai is inspired by countries that border the Baltic Sea, which includes Scandinavia, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, along with some Nordic, Slavic, and Celtic influences. Khaenri'ah has not officially been released within the game, but is mentioned several times within the game's lore. What we know so far is that it is a subterranean region that is not under the authority of the Seven Archons. It is also said by players to take influences from Germanic and Norse mythology. In the Huanglong chapter of the documentary, Heidi states, "So, when we created the environment of Genshin Impact, we adhered to a comprehensive system of laws to design the climate, vegetation, and creatures of each region, as well as the cultures and civilizations within these environments. This makes everything come together as one whole, connected by a complete framework." End quote. In the Guilin chapter of the documentary, Heidi states, "But the other side of the player's experience, it is the cultural elements, which create a sense of immersion. Creating a compelling cultural atmosphere is important to helping the player to embrace the game world. The architecture, the cultural landscape, and the human civilization that inhabits it must create the right atmosphere for the characters and their stories. These are all things we need to consider when designing environments. These cultural details add depth and vibrance to the world, bringing it to life." End quote. In the May 2021 Pash interview with the developers, they discussed the game's worldview, explaining how Gnosticism is the core of Genshin's worldview as well as the foundation of its storyline. When constructing worldview and the foundations of the story, the team referenced literature on various systems of myths and legends, eventually deciding on Gnosticism. In Gnostic legends, it discusses a theme of the relationship between humans and the world, which corresponds with the idea of the interactions between players and the in-game world in which Genshin represents through its open world design. In Gnosticism, there's the existence of lower-ranked gods, called Archons, whom we briefly talked about in the intro. These Archons are referred to as the holders of mortal power and represent great power in the mortal world, commanding the power of the elements while guiding the people in building their cities and civilizations. When designing the game's artifacts, the team took inspiration from tarot cards and William Blake's poetry. In tarot, there is a card named the Magician who commands 4 objects which represent the 4 classical elements, including the Chalice of Water, the Coin of Earth, the Wand of Fire, and the Sword of Wind. In William Blake's famous poem Auguries of Innocence, symbols of sand, flower, and robin's plume were used, which represent infinity, eternity, and judgment, with the team deciding on Flower of Life, Plume of Death, Sands of Time, Goblet of Space, and Circlet of Reason/Logic as the main themes for the artifacts. The developers discussed the complicated process of designing the game's characters. In the initial stages, when designing the characters, the team in charge of the plot and worldview, in addition to the development team, otherwise known as, quote, members of the art IP, exchange opinions and adjust their ideas. They decide on the character's basic details, then the production process starts, beginning with various adjustments of their artwork drafts. This process requires collaboration, communication, and many discussions among the teams over a long period of time. The hardest process for the team was figuring out how to express their thoughts and ideas into the gameplay while expressing details through the design of the characters. When designing character combat styles, the team first collects details on the character's appearance, personality, life, and personal experiences, and combines these aspects together, creating various animation drafts. The entire production team then selects these animation drafts and improves on them. Throughout the production process, the plot and game mechanics are still being changed and adjusted. Because of this, the team may need to make further adjustments to the combat styles, which can become quite a long process. You can really see the amount of time, research, and excruciating detail the team poured in to create the world of Genshin Impact. It's clear their ultimate goal was to create an open world that would give players a desire for exploration and an immersive experience. The game was first announced at E3 2019. E3, otherwise known as Electronic Entertainment Expo, was an annual trade event where video game developers, publishers, and industry professionals could showcase and promote their upcoming games. Most of the first reactions among the gaming community were quick to brush off the game as a Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild anime clone, but despite this, it gained public interest with its first closed beta testing later that same month on June 21st, 2019, with a first look at the gaming mechanics and city of Mondstat. On August 1st, 2019, Sony and MiHoYo announced the game's PlayStation release at the PlayStation pre-show online press conference titled No PlayStation No Play during China Joy 2019. After the first closed beta test, the team felt a sense of accomplishment and excitement. However, this didn't last long. Once they saw the public's response, it was far from what they had expected. They realized some people had misunderstood the team's intentions for Genshin Impact and for MiHoYo as a whole. This sparked worry and anxiety among the team, but they saw it as an opportunity to prove themselves. In the second half of 2019, the team quietly worked on the Liyue region and planned the second closed beta test for February 2020. However, it was delayed and instead released the following month on March 18th. After this release, they noticed people started to change their minds, as they began to better understand the team's vision for the game. Other issues would arise during the panorama in 2020 due to the Shanghai lockdowns. As I mentioned earlier, the development had become delayed as it was impossible for the employees to work from home as they didn't have access to the proper equipment. According to an article published by Vice, quote, "A lot of our development team members," said VP of Global Publishing Wen Yujin, "they were in their house, cannot work, and all the equipment was not sufficient enough for them to do their jobs being home." End quote. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's easy for a gaming company to work from home since they are considered by many to be technology companies. However, for MiHoYo, this was not the case. Liu Wei states in an interview in 2020, "Development is the biggest part of a video game company. In fact, it is very hard to work on development through remote work. In our company, many parts of development involves a lot of art assets, including 3D models and animations, and these work can only be done on company equipment." End quote. This is because game developers' computers need high hardware specs to handle rendering graphics, compiling code, and multitasking across multiple software applications. During the panorama, MiHoYo employees were stuck at home and couldn't go out, so they couldn't use their company equipment. If you built a PC yourself, you know it can be extremely expensive and time-consuming. We can reasonably assume that not everyone has a high-performance PC just lying around, and buying all the parts to set one up would be expensive for many people. The employees also needed to have access to MiHoYo's internal gaming engine for testing. A game engine is like a toolkit for video game development as it provides developers with the essential tools they need in order to build a game. This saves them time, allowing them to focus on designing unique gameplay, art, and narrative instead of having to create everything from scratch. I mentioned earlier how difficult the development process of Genshin was for the team, especially coordinating and learning how to work together to produce an integrated game. We can assume the panorama didn't make things easier. When MiHoYo resumed work on February 10, 2020, many team members couldn't go into the office due to quarantine, which left fewer employees working and, as you'd expect, slowed down overall work efficiency. However, by March 13, 2020, MiHoYo had resumed work with 90% of their employees back at the office. The final beta test was then released on July 2, 2020, with the full game officially released on September 28, 2020 on Android, iOS, PlayStation 4, and Windows. If there is any quote that sums up MiHoYo's journey, it would be this one. Liu Wei states, "We always strive to create products that go beyond user expectations, so we anticipate there will be many challenges. However, I believe this is the essence of our team as tech enthusiasts. Whether it's in technology, art, or game design, once we set a direction, we will persistently tackle it, disregarding costs, manpower, and any sacrifices necessary in order to overcome these challenges." End quote. Have you ever wondered what the name Genshin Impact actually means or where it comes from? According to an article by 33rd Square, the name Uenshen, Genshin's Chinese name, or Genshin, represents mortal ambition and the possibility of ascension to godhood. They are a bridge between mankind and the divine. Not gods yet, but with the potential to reach that state through their visions. End quote. At some point in their lives, characters from the Seven Nations were once mortals, or ordinary humans. The gods, or archons, saw their ambition and determination to pursue their goals even in the face of hardship and major turning points in their lives. In return, they granted these individuals a vision, which gave them elemental powers such as hydro, pyro, dendro, etc., to aid them on their journey. In the Traveler Vision story, the Traveler states, "But if a person is found to have surpassing ambition even as their life reaches such a desperate turning point, then the gods would look upon them with favor. This favor is the vision, an external magical focus given to those who have been acknowledged by the gods, which they can use to channel elemental power." End quote. Ayers proposes the idea that Uenshen, meaning original god, likely references two key concepts. Uen, which is origin or primal beginning, and Shen, which is deity or divine force. Together, Uenshen evokes the first deities born into primordial chaos and their innate untainted divinity. These themes of new beginnings and purity permeate Genshin Impact's story. Ayers further states how this lore alludes to ancient Chinese beliefs about the genesis of the universe and spiritual cultivation, but presents them through a fantastical anime lens for broad appeal. The name Impact conveys the rippling force of change triggered by mortals, gods, and history-altering events. Nothing in Teyvat remains static or unaffected. End quote. When Inazuma, one of the Seven Nations, was launched in the game, players became curious if they could use Kaya, a cryo user, to build a long ice bridge to Inazuma. But they had to be careful of getting struck by Inazuma's lightning. Rain is so appropriate. You're probably like, what are you talking about? Rain is so appropriate. I know, it's actually good. The rain. Ah! Japanese YouTuber Maguro Head created a 4-minute and 59-second video titled Inazuma Illegal Entry, which currently as of this video has over 1.9 million views, using a co-op party of 4 Kayas to create an ice bridge that would transport them to Rito, which is the sub-area and port of entry to Inazuma. Starting at the Liyue harbor and making their way over the large Teyvat Ocean, not without rain and getting struck by lightning, of course, which transports them right back to Liyue. This is one of the cutest Easter eggs. If players go to the small island to the east of Yaoguang and north of Guyuan, Stone Forest, and Liyue, they will find rocks formed in the shape of a heart. The easiest way for players to travel there is to travel to the geohypostasis and activate the pinwheel using an animal character, and then glide north to the small island. In addition, if players do a co-op and both players stand in the heart-shaped rocks, a chest will appear. Located in the southern end of the city of Mondstat is a mysterious hydro seal that players would try to unlock using Barbara's magic or Shincho's rain swords, although they were unsuccessful. When players tried to investigate, a dialogue message would read, quote, "This door seems to be locked by a curious seal. I wonder whose place this is." It wasn't until the character Mona's story quest Beyond the World Stars was released, players learned that it was one of the character's Goth's properties, but someone had placed a hydro seal over it, and because of this, he was unable to lease it. Mona eventually breaks the seal and moves in after Goth rents it out to her at a low price. Players are able to interact with Mona through the door, but once the quest ends and they leave the area, the door would no longer be interactable, although it would show up later in a few other quests. Cooking is an important part of Genshin Impact. As we mentioned earlier, it's a way to improve health and revive characters. If players fail to position the indicator at the correct time, they will end up with a suspicious looking dish. And let's just say the descriptions, well, they're not holding back their quote, roasting. This one says, suspicious mega meaty sushi. Sushi made using barbecued meat. The meat slices lean every which way, dry as firewood. To eat this is to climb peaks fraught with peril. An expedition for which retreating halfway might prove wise. A very small cake nestled within a boule fruit skin. You could not resist sneaking a peek as this baked, only to see the expanding souffle collapse speedingly. It seems that curiosity not only kills cats, but ruins cakes too. An innovative stuffed dessert. The bursting bubbles send waves of pain across your tongue, combined with the imagery of their green and crispy coatings. The experience is not unlike cramming exploding dendrocores into your mouth. Hilly churls are just one of the common enemies in Genshin Impact, but there is one hilly churl that stands out from the rest. They are called the unusual hilly churl. If you look at its mask, it translates to Wei, which is a reference to the co-founder of MiHoYo, Liu Wei. He pulls out a yellow plushie called Homu, which is a reference to Houkai Gakuen 2 and is Branya's doll in Honkai Impact 3rd. The cabbages he uses and drops when you defeat him are a reference to the mascot of Honkai Impact 3rd, Ai-chan, whose hairstyle and hair color resemble cabbages. There are a few times where Paimon breaks the fourth wall. If the player goes out of bounds, Paimon will say, "How about we explore the area ahead of us later?" Another time is when the player goes to the audio settings menu and plays around with the dialogue volume. Paimon will directly address the player.
Paimon coming in! Paimon coming in! Is this level okay? Can you hear Paimon? Hey! Are you just messing with Paimon?
If players do this 4 times, they receive the achievement. You could hear Paimon all along, couldn't you? There are various pop culture and anime references within Genshin Impact. Ella Musk is a NPC located in Mondstat that is an obvious reference to If You Know, You Know. An NPC named Arthur is shown staring at a sword in the ground. This sword is a reference to the sword of King Arthur called Excalibur, and the character Arthur is a reference to King Arthur in the Sword in the Stone novel. The NPCs Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, who are all members of the Knights of Favonius, are references to the French historical novel The Three Musketeers. Liben, a traveling merchant who was a new NPC introduced during the Marvelous Merchandise event, is seen carrying Dragon Balls on his backpack, which we all know is a reference to the popular and legendary anime series Dragon Ball. He's also seen carrying a crystal, which is a reference to MiHoYo's previous game, Honkai Impact 3rd. There are a few references from the popular anime JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In the early version of the game, there were achievements called Stardust Crusader and Gold Experience Requiem. The character Razor has a burst, which is a reference to JoJo's stance, and the character Fischl's pose is a reference to the character Jonathan Joestar's iconic pose. Klee is the daughter of Alice, known by her codename A. She was a famous adventurer who wrote the Teyvat Travel Guide. She and Klee share the same pointed elf ears and are both of a long-lived elven race. Also, Klee can apparently bomb Mondstat. The character Chungyun is a cryo user and an exorcist who was born with excessive yang, positive energy, which makes him vulnerable to heat. Thus, if he is anywhere near heat, he risks losing his yang energy and his emotions will go out of control. Bennett is a pyro user as well as a support and is arguably considered to be the best 4-star character in the game, if you don't count his C6 constellation. He's also the most unlucky character. Funny enough, his constellation, Rhoda Calamitas, is Latin for Wheel of Misfortune. He is the sole and only member left of the Benny's Adventure Team, which is a team of adventurers in the Mondstat Adventurers Guild, as everyone left the team due to him constantly being followed by bad luck. Bennett's birthday is also on February 29th, which is a leap day that occurs every 4 years. Tartaglia, also known as Child, was at the time the most difficult for the development team to design, as they had to figure out how to convey both his culture and customs of his hometown Snezhnaya into his design, as well as his unique combat style, which gives him the ability to change stances through his elemental skill called the melee stance. Raiden Shogun at the time took the longest time to design, as her boss fight, combat style, and storyline required the efforts and collaboration of a large team. She's also confirmed to be one of the 7 Archons. Lisa is a librarian of the Knights of Favonius and is known for being the most talented sorceress to study at Sumeru Academia. According to the chef in the troublesome work quest, she is a vegetarian. She also has what she refers to as pumpkin phobia, which is a fear of pumpkins. The Genshin Impact community, despite facing criticism and sometimes being labeled toxic by internet users and parts of the gaming space, is no doubt a massive community made up of both highly dedicated and casual players. Genshin Impact usually gets an update on a roughly 6-week cycle, and each update includes limited banners where players can wish for new or rerun characters. A character is introduced through the term drip marketing, which features a splash art and lore of a character before they are officially released, through Genshin's official X/Twitter account. Then a YouTube livestream called Special Program reveals the version update's upcoming content. In anticipation for the new character launch, many players will save their Primo Gems and farm materials in advance to prepare for the character's launch. Some people in the community are really kind to new players, helping them out through co-op, which makes the beginning of the game feel a lot less overwhelming. A lot of players have also created beginner guides and helpful resources on sites like traveler.gg and genshin.gg, as well as on YouTube, covering everything from character builds and farming materials, earning Primo Gems, and fully exploring each region for 100% completion of the map. There have also been plenty of fan art and cosplay creations from talented players in the community. On top of that, many players have made popular memes based on the game. There is an official Discord server, as well as other servers dedicated to the game that players have created, where many new players or beginners will join and ask for help with fighting bosses or grinding for materials. It's also become a place where players can have a space to discuss the game and meet other players. There's an official community forum called MiHoYo Lab where players can create posts and chat with other players about the game, as well as receive official information about events and other perks. There's an official community subreddit with over 3.6 million travelers created on June 7, 2019, as well as an active and dedicated community on Twitter or X. That being said, with Genshin's huge community and success also comes drama and controversy. And that's where we're going to end part 1. Join me next time for part 2, where we'll dive into Genshin's massive success, controversies, and drama, and what the future might look like for the game. Thank you so much for watching this very, very long video. It was a monster to make. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next part. Bye!